Welcome back to another Mile High Sneakers video and a warm welcome to any new viewers. Today I'm going to be working on a pair of infrared Jordan 11s. Since the shoes are nearly 10 years old at this point, there are a slew of issues with them. One of the big issues with these shoes is that there are a whole bunch of scuffs and scratches on the upper of the shoe. The unfortunate part with a lot of these scratches is that they are quite deep, and this will require me to put some filler into the upper of the shoe to get them nice and flat again. Just like the upper of the shoe, the midsole also has a whole bunch of different tears that are quite deep on them. Now, to take a positive from the upper of the shoe is that the back part of the shoe here that has the Jumpman stitched into it is that they are in good condition and there's very little paint fading or paint scratching on them. The worst part of these shoes is that the soles have been heavily worn. Here you can see that the soles have been so heavily worn that they've actually ended up wearing through the outsole and also have started wearing through part of the midsole. Unfortunately, not only is this a problem on the right shoe, it is also a problem on the left shoe. Another issue due to the heavy wear on the soles of the shoes is that the carbon fiber has suffered a lot of damage. Unfortunately, in some small areas on the midsole, you can see where the carbon fiber has been completely worn through. To fix this issue with the carbon fiber, I'm going to go ahead and have to reskin it with a new layer of carbon fiber. To start the shoe off before I start restoring it, I'm going to go ahead and give it a deep clean just to make sure that I get all the dirt and grime off the upper of the shoe so that I don't accidentally sand it into the upper of the shoe. To anyone enjoying the video so far, it would be greatly appreciated if you went ahead and liked the video. And also to any new or returning viewers, it'd be greatly appreciated if you went ahead and subscribed to the channel so that you can stay up to date with the newest restorations. To start this restoration, I'm going to go ahead and remove the old outsole and midsoles since I will not be reusing them. Since I do not care how these two parts of the shoes come off, I'm going to go ahead and use a decent amount of acetone to get them off quickly. Next, it's finally time to remove the outsoles and midsoles from the donor shoe. For the donor shoe, I'm using a pair of Jordan Futures. Luckily for these Jordans, I was able to find a pair that actually had the exact same outsole as the original shoe. Now, what I said before about the outsoles matching perfectly to the original ones was not 100% true. The only difference between the donor outsoles and the original outsoles is that there is a red Jumpman on the donor outsoles compared to where there is no Jumpman on the original outsoles. So to ensure that I make this shoe as original as possible, I'm going ahead and cutting out the red Jumpman from the donor soles. I made my original cutting with an X-Acto knife, and I'll end up going back with the Dremel tool to make sure I sand out the rest of the Jumpman. To fix the upper of the shoes, I'm going to go ahead and have to fill the areas that have deep scratches. To start fixing the upper of the shoes, I'm going to go ahead and sand them down with 150 grit sandpaper. This will smooth out the upper of the shoe while also giving a nice base for the filler to stick to. As a last step before I go ahead and start putting the filler onto the upper of the shoe, I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down with some acetone and cotton balls just to make sure that there isn't any contaminants in the area that I need to put the filler in. Before I start to go ahead and fix the carbon fiber on the midsole of the shoe, I'm going to go ahead and cut it out of the original midsole. Instead of using a rotary tool with a cutoff wheel, I'm going ahead and using an X-Acto knife to cut the carbon fiber piece out. This way I'll limit any damage that I could do to the carbon fiber. Now with the carbon fiber panels cut out of the midsoles, I can see the extent of the full damage on them. Luckily, the carbon fiber panel on the right shoe has suffered less than the one on the left. The left panel doesn't only have damage to the exposed carbon fiber bits, but it also has large cracks on areas that are not exposed. This has made the carbon fiber panel very weak and flimsy. While I was doing a whole bunch of different things to the shoes, I went into the light box just because there was a tiny bit of oxidization on them that I wanted to remove. For the next part of the restoration, I'm going to go ahead and sand down the donor midsole since it does not match up perfectly to the upper of the shoe. Here you can see that the donor midsoles don't perfectly cover up areas of the upper that were previously not exposed. Before I started filming this, I went ahead and sanded down the midsole for the left shoe. Here you can see that it matches up much better compared to the right shoe. The first step to get the midsole and the upper of the shoe to fit perfectly is to go ahead and sand down the upper of the shoe. For this, I'm just sanding down any large bits of the original midsole that are on the upper of the shoe just so that I can make sure I'm having a perfect fit. Now with the upper cleared of any midsole remnants, I'm going to go ahead and start sanding down the donor midsoles. Now that the upper and the midsole of the shoe fit perfectly together, it's time for me to sand the midsole off the carbon fiber panel. Since I cut the carbon fiber panel off with the large bit of the midsole, I'm going to go ahead and have to sand down quite a bit, but I'm also going to leave a tiny bit of the midsole left on the carbon fiber panel just to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. Now that I've sanded off the midsole from the carbon fiber panel, it's time for me to go ahead and remove the fiberglass panel from the donor soles. For this, I ended up using a blow dryer to lightly melt the glue and ended up using acetone to fully melt the rest of it off. I ended up going back and forth between the two steps of blow drying and using acetone to make sure that I didn't damage the midsole or the fiberglass panel. Finally, it's time to go ahead and fix the carbon fiber panel. For this, I ended up buying a carbon fiber repair kit which came with some epoxy resin and epoxy hardener. The process that I'm using here to fix the carbon fiber panel is called an overlay. This is just because I'm putting a new panel of carbon fiber over top of the existing one already. Before I went ahead and put down the carbon fiber fabric that I needed to fix the panel, I went ahead and put a thin layer of the resin that I ended up mixing together. I did this just to make sure that I would end up having the carbon fiber panel stick without having any issues. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a repair kit that had the exact same weave pattern for the carbon fiber. The weave on the carbon fiber repair panel that I ended up having looks a bit similar to the original fiberglass panel that was on the donor soles. After I attached the carbon fiber fabric onto the panel, I went ahead and put down some more resin on top of it so that it would end up curing together. After I had both panels covered with the new carbon fiber, I went ahead and threw them into my light box since it was said that they needed to cure at around 75 degrees to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. For the curing process, I ended up leaving the 2 panels inside my light box for about 2 days with a shoebox covering the top of them. While I had the carbon fiber panels curing in my light box, I went ahead and started filling the little holes in the upper of the shoe. From previous experience with using the Angelus leather filler, I found that it's better to let this stuff to cure overnight before I start sanding it down. For the filler, I ended up having to do 2 rounds after sanding down the original coat. I ended up sanding it down originally with 150 grit and then ended up moving on to 220 grit. After I did my first round of 220 grit sandpaper, that's when I ended up doing the second layer of the filler onto the upper of the shoe. Now, while I waited for the second layer of filler to go ahead and dry, I went ahead and repainted the midsoles of the shoes since they seemed to be a little discolored. After I ended up sanding down the second layer of filler on the upper of the shoes, I went ahead and started painting them. Now, for my personal preference when I'm painting patent leather shoes, I go ahead and put down several coats of paint and then end up sanding it down to get it smoother. For this process, I started at 220 grit sandpaper, then painted the shoe again, then worked all the way up to 1000 grit. After 2 days of the carbon fiber curing in my light box, it was time for me to finally cut any excess off of it. To cut the carbon fiber, I just used some leather shears, and on the areas that I couldn't get the scissors into, I was able to use my X-Acto knife to cut the carbon fiber. Lastly, for the upper, before I go ahead and repaint it for the last time, I'm going to go ahead and wet sand it with 1000 grit sandpaper. The wet sanding will end up making the upper of the shoe very smooth while also making sure that there's no sanding marks left in the upper paint. The best part about wet sanding the upper of the shoe before I go ahead and repaint it is that it will give the gloss paint that I put on it later more of a glass-like finish. To finish off the upper of the shoes before I go ahead and re-glue them to the midsoles is I'm going to go ahead and spray them with a black high gloss spray paint. For the upper of the shoes, the reason I'm using this high gloss black spray paint is that it provides a better gloss than anything that I could get from an Angelus or regular leather paint.
We must pay homage to him.